So if you're just joining us, welcome. I was just getting tonight's conversation started by saying I'm Deborah Kane. I'm the president of the Lower Columbia Canoe Club. We're a recreational paddling club in Portland, Oregon, the host of tonight's discussion with three preeminent, world-class, wonderful canoeists. And tonight's discussion was organized by my colleague and fellow board member, Will Gare. So I want to actually hand things over to Will. Will, as I understand it, you'll be leading the discussion, and we will have plenty of time at the end for questions from the crowd. So if you've got a question, you can hop into the chat, but will give you a few more instructions and give you a better sense of how tonight will transpire. So Will, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Deborah. Welcome all. It's great to see you from both coasts. And so I'm a canoeist, oddly enough. And I thought that this would be a good talk to have, since a lot of what we do is either general whitewater or more or less kayaking oriented. And the club has, as Deborah said, has, a good number of canoeists. I wouldn't say it's anywhere close to 50%, unfortunately. And that kind of is the pattern that, I find in a lot of the clubs in the US, the whitewater clubs in the US, and with the possible exception of maybe the Southeast, where, as Teresa and I found last spring when we spent about 6 weeks there were more canoeists that we encountered on all the rivers. And it was really refreshing, actually, I got to say. I felt more at home because, you go in the Ocoee and it's like, well, for every 10 kayakers, there was a canoeist. Which I don't think we can say is true, actually, in the Northwest. So, it begs the question of, why over the last 50 years since whitewater boating really became a thing, why has it drifted more toward kayaking than canoeing? And, a lot of us know some of the easy answers. And I thought it would be really fun to ask some people who have been canoeing their whole lives and are quite accomplished, won medals at different competitions, right and left. And so of course they have a real history with a canoe, but they've always had throughout their life the chance to convert to a kayak and be able to handle harder whitewater, not have to bail so much and all that. And I thought it would be really interesting to see what their perspectives are, and how it's kind of translated in their lives as to why they've stuck with canoeing as opposed to something else, and what they think the present state of canoeing in the country is, especially whitewater oriented canoeing, and whether or not they think it's becoming displaced with kayaking, and if so, what does that bode for the future of canoeing, of whitewater canoeing, or if it's holding its own, and how and why, and really what the prognosis is for whitewater canoeing in the US, looking forward. So I'm going to just start with that question to get things kicked off. Feel free to ask questions in the chat, and Teresa will be monitoring that and will then be relating those questions to the panelists as we go. My thought was that we might spend an hour talking about this evening. And if it goes longer than that, and there's a lot of questions and people are still very interested in carrying on, we'll do that. But after about an hour, I'm assuming it might start to slow down, and we'll try to probably keep it close to an hour so that as a recording that people visit later on, it's not intimidating, and they, things move along and they can get things out of it. So that's my thought about what we do this evening. And I guess I'll turn it over to the panel. Take turns, figure out who wants to go first. And then please, the rest of you, start asking questions in the chat as we listen to their responses. So who wants to kick it off? Shall I repeat the question? Like, why do you canoe? I know each of you has a history, a long history canoeing. So, you did your competitions and so on. And after that, maybe you just kept canoeing instead of turning to kayaking, which is, arguably, the better boat for harder whitewater, doesn't ship water, don't have a big hole in the top. You don't have to bail in eddies all the time. So what is it about canoeing that attracted you initially, and why are you still attracted to canoeing as opposed to any other kind of watercraft?
Well, this is Nolan. For me, I would say the reason I like canoeing so much more than kayaking is the seating position was much more comfortable. It was a much more natural stroke with a single paddle for me personally. And I like the height, the visibility down the river always felt much safer to me, because I know, number one, I can jump out of that canoe. I can either stand up or get up on my knees and get a lot better view of what's downstream, unless it's just a really, really steep stream. Those are probably the primary things. I just always enjoyed the challenge of it. I always felt like, well, what most people can do in a kayak back then, I could do in a canoe. And so it was challenging without being, I guess some would refer to as suicidal in some cases.
I would say that for me, my name's Eli. I grew up canoeing. I started when I was about 8 years old, and I paddled with my grandparents. And so I have every time I go out, I feel connected to my parents, who I lost my father, my grandparents, I've lost them. But when I go canoeing, I still feel like they're out there with me. And I do like that. I think other things that play in a little bit, being from the Southeast, kayaking is not the native craft. The canoe was. So I like thinking back to ancestors that I don't even know and think about how they would get across the water. And I find it fascinating. I've been to the Canadian Canoe Museum and looked at all the different types of boats. There's some funny little boats. There's like round boats that were some parts of the world, little baskets basically people climbed into. But the design of the canoe has really stood for the most part for hundreds of years, which I think is pretty fascinating.
Wayne,
And
you have any thoughts?
this Wayner, yeah. So I think for me, I kind of sort of a little bit of both. I remember Nolan mentioned having that visibility where you can see downstream, and after paddling years of canoe and C1 and other sea boats, I remember coming up to the Nantahala Falls one time, and I was in a kayak, and I remember getting up there and trying to look at my line, and I got up there and I went, I'm blind. And so, you kind of lose a little bit of that visibility. You don't realize how much more visibility you have in a canoe until you don't have it anymore. So I think that, and I like the leverage that you can get out of a canoe stroke over a kayak stroke. Kayak stroke can be a lot quicker, but canoe strokes just feel more powerful, and just yeah, I just like that. And the fluidity, canoeists before kayakers really tended to blend strokes a lot more to try to make things happen with the boat. And so I love that, experimenting with different strokes.
It's interesting to me also, when you look at the top playboaters, a lot of them have raised their seats in the last several years. And they also have adopted cross strokes to initiate, to get more torque in some of their maneuvers. Kayaking a lot of times has followed the canoe. We had planing hulls well before the kayaks did.
Why are the canoeists raising their seats?
I'm talking the kayakers were raising their seats to
Kayakers.
be able to get some of the leverage that the canoe naturally has. Yeah,
I see. Gotcha.
The canoeists are raising our seats because we're getting old.
True that. Right. Well, I kayak some as well, I have to admit. And one thing that I really love about it is that you don't have to avoid the holes so much. You can just bash through them, and guess what? You come through and you don't have a boat full of water. So I just love sometimes jumping in a kayak and going straight down the river through whatever's in front of me, instead of wandering all over the place. I mean, it is easier. By the same token, that same wandering around and maneuvering around holes in the canoe, I find a really compelling challenge. It's you can't take anything for granted. when you're starting at the top of a long rapid and you're figuring out so much all at the same time about your line, because it might be just a read and run kind of rapid. Yet the holes are big enough so that you have to avoid them if you don't want to fill up. So, I mean, I'm attracted to canoeing, I think, because of that challenge of maneuvering, and you have to be on the ball all the time. And in a kayak, you can just really, float a lot more. So how about some other people in the audience who are canoeists? Maybe you all have something to add that we haven't heard yet about, why you like canoeing and why you haven't switched away from it.
There's 2 comments in the chat as well when you want them.
Okay.
I don't hear anyone speaking up. So the first one is from Bill Brock. He comments that the kayak roll is quick and clean, but the canoe roll seems slow to him, and he's looking for suggestions on how to speed up his roll.
My first thought on that is sometimes when I flip in a canoe, you can get hung up, like the boat's kind of hung. So if you know you're going to flip anyway, throw yourself into it all the way through that rotation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say along those same lines, the end of it is just as important. The most mistakes that I saw when I was teaching people is they roll up. Let's say you're paddling the right side, you roll up on the right side, and then they try to bring their body back upright on the right side, which you look at it engineering wise, you're now pushing your right knee, you're pushing the boat right back down. So the important thing that most people did not find natural was almost wipe your nose on the gunnel, drop your body down low. Of course, I always believed in a boat that didn't have airbags all the way down. If you've got airbags, the lowest you're going to go is the airbag. But otherwise, bring your body right down across the belly of the boat and up the opposite side, and that locks it in and makes it a lot faster roll, as well as the fact that it's really solid that way. If you're trying to come up on the same side you rolled up on, you're always fighting yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Oddly, I found it easier to roll a canoe or sea boat, either one. And sometimes if and canoes do roll a little slower, and I totally echo exactly what Nolan just said. I found the same things. And sometimes if somebody's struggling to roll in their canoe, a C1 will roll, quicker. So it's a little snappier roll, but it's still the same things. And so sometimes with a canoe, you just need a little bit more patience with it to kind of slosh the water through.
And one other thing is, you don't rush it. A lot of people are trying to get a halfway set up and then try to roll, and you're a lot better off. Take your time, get your setup exactly right, and then just go hard and be done with it. I think the biggest mistake people make is trying to rush it.
I don't always have a transfer tube in my canoe saddle, but I do find it beneficial for people that are having trouble with the roll. Just to help.
What's a transfer tube?
A hole in your saddle that you put a PVC pipe, maybe like it depends on your saddle, but a 3-inch pipe, so that the water can transfer through easily instead of getting damaged.
Oh, the slosh. Yes.
Yeah.
So you're not lifting half a boat full of water up in the air.
Mhm.
Got another good question in the chat. It's from someone named Noah Phillips, who's a young canoe builder. And he wants to know, what is the future of whitewater canoe design going to look like?
I'll leave that to the people that are more current than I am. I did my thing quite a few years ago, and I really was amazed when the little short boats, the rotomolded boats, started being so popular that they almost took over the sport, or maybe some people think they have. So I don't know that I could answer that. It already surprised me where things have gone in the last 15, 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Eli, I think you'd be a good one to speak to that.
Well, it's
Yeah.
interesting, kind of, because it depends on the season as to what I do. I saw somebody in the chat referenced C1ing being a great option, and when it's cold, you'll see me in the winter putting a skirt on for my play boating, because even though I have a dry suit, I don't like to be cold. I even have a backup dry suit. I'm that adverse to it at this point. But where is it going? I think that the kayaks have definitely turned into more jump into the boat, click, 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 and they fit. And I find that's probably the biggest challenge with canoes is we're all different sizes and shapes, and the boats are not the easiest to outfit if you don't know what you're doing. So perhaps one aspect is just making it easier for people to get into the canoe would help attract people to the canoe. When I say there's different types of canoeing, I love the slalom canoeing. I paddle a spark, and I really enjoy it. But then I find myself wanting to run waterfalls, and I've run waterfalls in this park. It's totally capable, but it's easier in one of the modern plastic stubby boats. I'm surprised that there haven't been more varieties. Blackfly made the Ion. Skiff has the Spanish Fly that's been from multiple companies at this point. Those are playful boats. The rest of them, not so much so. I was on the Salmon last spring. We hit 60,000. That's nothing to Nolan, but that's a lot of water for me. And I definitely, I found myself in my creaking canoe wishing I was in a playboat in that moment. Because those eddy lines are big.
Well, getting back to rolling a canoe, I wonder if you guys have some thoughts about the way that we teach beginning whitewater canoeing and the way that beginning whitewater kayaking is taught, which often starts with get your roll down. So in a canoe, I didn't try to start rolling until years after I started whitewater canoeing. And by then I was used to just getting free of the boat if I flipped. And it still is taking a long time for me to be used to being under the boat and sticking with the boat so that I really try my roll. And I think it's established a real hardship for me making that transition to the roll. What do you think?
Well, my experience was back when I was doing it, people thought that it's not even for real. So that's at least livened things up a little bit when people realized, it's not some trick or anything else, that it's a reliable technique. It just depends, most importantly, on how well you are locked into the canoe. And I used to get two big old guys at some of the canoe meetings when I was giving a presentation. You pick me up upside down and you see if you can shake me out of this canoe. And there's no way that I'm coming out of that canoe unless I release my ankles and decide to come out. And I think that's the biggest thing. But as far as teaching it to start with, I would be afraid that might discourage a lot of people. But along those same lines, I had a lot of rubs with the ACA methods of teaching, because stuff like a J stroke and stuff that was very limiting to class 2 or 3 water. And when I would argue with the people, the authorities, whatever about it, they would say, well, that's what the vast majority of canoeists want to do. They don't want to go beyond that. So it's not a limitation. But as you will just stated, anything that is going to prevent you from moving to more advanced levels of the same sport is an erroneous thing to teach in the beginning, in my opinion. But I'll get off that, because that could probably lead us in the wrong direction.
This isn't rolling specific necessarily, but what I've found helpful with brand new paddlers is everything feels so terrible to begin with. I like to start them with the cross strokes, because if they get good cross strokes, they can be good paddlers. But if you're afraid to ever use your offside, then you're going to be limited for a longer period before you finally get over that. And so I'll make people, I call it a cross bow pry. I don't know, Wayne or Nolan, what you call that stroke when we're on the offside and we're turning to your onside.
That'd be a cross forward sweep, wouldn't it, Eli?
Okay, cross forward sweep, that could work, but
Yeah,
I'm not taking it very far back. I want it to be really short in the front. Don't sweep it to the middle, and the recovery of that stroke being pretty critical. Now, as far as the rolling, it depends on the paddler. So, some people get into canoeing because they don't want to roll because they're afraid of being upside down and they like being able to get out. So you have to feel out who it is that you're trying to teach as to what you're going to give them.
This is Mark Lewis speaking. I want to shout out to Noel, and we go back a little ways for a few years, and haven't seen you in a while, Nolan.
Good to see you.
I just wanted to comment, the roll in a canoe just opens up a whole new world. Back when I was paddling with Nolan, I felt that I could go into anything and not worry about swimming because I knew I had a bomb-proof roll. And if I went into a big hole and there was a pool below it, that was not a problem because I knew if I flipped over, I was going to roll back up. And so I think it's important for somebody that's getting into bigger whitewater and doing some of this stuff. And my son is into it now. And that was one thing I told him. I said, you learn to roll because it's going to make it safer for you. The other thing the roll does is it helps on your low brace. You got a real strong low brace once you learn how to roll. It really helps that low brace.
Mhm.
Definitely agree with all those points.
Yeah, go ahead and speak up.
I just definitely 100% agree with all those points. It makes
Mhm.
canoeing really a whole different sport, but I still echo the idea that I would fear that people in the early stages might get scared away from it because it is difficult. It takes coordination. It's like everything else riding a bicycle. Once you've got it, you've got it. Well, not always, but most of the time. But trying to teach that in the very beginning, I would be afraid would scare a lot of people away. But I totally agree that once you've got it, then it's a whole different sport for you.
Mhm.
I think I lost mine, Nolan.
Oh, dear.
Oh, goodness. I never saw that.
Mary, I saw you had a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to say heads up and hi to Nolan. I don't know if he
Hey.
remembers me or not.
I absolutely do. Good to see you,
I
girl.
bought a Descender, White Soul Descender from you early in the 1990s. And it made all the difference in the world to getting my confidence up and being able to run harder things. And I live in Colorado now, belong to the Rocky Mountain Canoe Club. But one reason why I like canoeing is we do a lot of multi-day trips and without support, so we can carry our own gear and stuff like that. But anyway, I owe a lot of my interest in the whole sport to Nolan and his patience with giving me some lessons. So thank you, and nice
Well,
to see you again.
Wonderful to see you again. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for that. Other people had the same comment that the gear hauling capacity was a significant plus. And there was one question that came through that I thought was interesting. Someone, Jan Dooley, says, please talk about how practicing on slalom gates improved your paddling skills.
That's probably me.
Yeah, you're the main slalom guy.
And so the thing that I like about slalom is it just gives you a chance to work on precision without severe consequences. So you can try it over and over again. You can make changes and you can work on finessing things. You can a little more easily work on subtleties, especially if you're working on guiding the boat and not trying to go as fast as you possibly can, because sometimes you're not really thinking about the efficiencies as much as you're thinking about trying to go hard. And so I think that that's one of the things that I really liked about it, was that it helped, and it goes back and forth. I think the slalom skills helps you refine your river running skills, and your river running skills lend into, paddling in the gates better too. So having more comfort level there.
And both you and Eli are more on the slalom than I, but the one thing that I learned from it was you have a lot more attention to whether the current's gone faster than you or you are gone faster than the current. In typical whitewater situations, you very seldom have that issue, but it can come up and really bite you on the butt. But when you're playing with slalom gates, you become very aware of, okay, I'm slowing down. Now the current's going faster than I, and the whole equation starts to change. And that's a good thing to know when you get into some serious whitewater. It's just one's a lot more critical and one's a good learning fun.
Well, getting back to the comment about preferring canoeing because it's the obvious gear hauler. I wanted to point out that we were talking about boat design, and I have a black fly option, which is 8 feet 10 inches. And I have a bevy of other canoes, you know, some going back to the early 90s and 13, 14 feet long that I paddle solo or have in the past. But to tell you the truth, my boat of choice now for trips, for multi-days, is the option. I find that it carries every bit as much as I want to carry, more than a kayak, really. So no problem there. And it handles really well, even when it's loaded with gear. I don't need all that extra length and volume in a canoe in order for it to be a good gear hauler. And the option does fine in whitewater. In fact, better. It paddles drier than those longer boats in most whitewater. So in any case, you know, in terms of boat design, I think the shorter, you know, in this case, plastic boat just is very versatile and really hasn't given up anything to those longer boats except possibly speed and efficiency. I would say on longer distances, it certainly takes more effort to get from point A to point B. Any thoughts on that?
One of the things that I've noticed is that if you've got a bigger canoe, the more room that you have in it, the more your kayaking buddies are going to try to empty their boats out into yours.
And I like to use my Spanish fly a lot and stick my gear in my buddy's kayak. So
Yeah.
I'm particular about the weight. I don't mind carrying weight, but it has to be balanced. So that's been a little bit of a trick with the little boats, because the airbags will come out on you if you don't have them in securely. But if you have them in securely, it's a little bit more difficult to get your gear in and out. So there's definitely a balance there. For years, I've thought about getting little tabs that I could have quick connects, but I have yet to take the time to outfit a boat that way. But I like I like to be dead center. I don't like stern heavy. I don't like bow heavy. And so whatever I put in the front, I have to also put in the back, or equivalent, not necessarily the same gear. A bigger boat doesn't bother me. If I'm in a, you know, I did the Grand Canyon with a Vertige X, and I found that the bigger the boat, the more gear I need. It's not that I need it, but I carried more junk that I didn't really need, that I'm digging through my bags trying to find the 5 personal items that I'm really after. But a giant boat, not a giant boat, but a bigger boat, I can carry more gear without thinking about it, but I don't need it. Will's probably dead on that option carries everything it needs.
How about electric pumps in canoes? Is it really prevalent in the Southeast? I saw some last year, but I don't know really what percentage of people depend on them. And is it you know, is it cheating? Is it inelegant? What do people think about using electric pumps in canoes in the Southeast, especially?
Eli, do you want to hit them?
You may take that.
You go. Wayne.
My thought is the more ways to bail, the better. You know, years ago, I was trying to keep up with my kayaking buddies, and I started doing what I called rock dumps, where you would do a spin before the rock and tilt over on it and drain the water. The Clorox jugs, probably the classic, worked well. Using the paddle, if you have the space in front of your saddle to splash the water out. Although I did see my dad break a wooden paddle doing that once. There's the old school pump that you would manually do. I found that wore my elbow really quickly. I didn't like it. I was one of those people that was a purist for a while, saying, "Oh, we don't need electric skirts. We don't need those pumps." But honestly, in my Spanish fly, I have one now, and it's pretty awesome. I have a lot of problems where the battery connection comes loose on me at the worst opportune time. Some of the biggest rivers I've tried to run, I've gone into them thinking, "Oh, I've got a pump, I'll be good." And then immediately my pump dies and I'm back to the way I used to do it. So the more ways you have to bail, I think the better. The biggest detriment I see to those pumps is people depend on them, and they used to get out and walk and tilt their boat and dump it out, and they would be really comfortable in eddies, jumping in and out of eddies. And now they're not as comfortable outside of the boat as they used to be, and they complain about their knees hurting because they're not stretching them by getting out of the boat. That's my thought.
I just was selfishly feeling like it's extra weight, and I can get the water out quicker with my paddle than, I mean, I can, with the first few strokes of a paddle, you've got 20 gallons out of the boat, and that pump's going to pump 1 or 2 gallons a minute, whatever. So I just never saw the trade-off being worthwhile. I had nothing against it other than for my own personal position. I could do better with a paddle.
I'm laughing because my father set up a pump in an Explorer, and we were on the lower Yacht, and we're next to a perfect rock to step out on, and we would be dry in no time. And I've already said I don't like to be cold. So we're sitting in a half a boat full of water, and he's like, wait. He said, and it took forever. It was not worth the time.
Yeah, to me, I'm the same way. It's a weight issue for me, and I didn't get. I mean, there's definitely times where it is sweet to, if you're, out playing in the middle of the river, and especially if you've got a wide river, and then you got to work your way over. At least you can be, flip the pump on while you're crawling your way over there, and it makes it a little bit easier to dump on the side. But yeah, I can definitely see advantages of them. I think I agree with both Eli and Nolan about they seem to work better on smaller boats than bigger boats, because there's more efficient ways to get lots of water out of boats than in big boats.
I've been playing at the Whitewater Center in Charlotte a fair bit over the last couple of years, and it's a concrete ditch without good places to get out, and the pump is very handy there, but not necessary, but it does make life easy.
So Wayne, what's the status of the C1 or C2 slalom in the US? Is it still going strong? Is it not? If not, why?
Well, when it got dropped off the world and Olympic programs, C2, what they did was a few years ago, I can't remember exactly what year it was, to try to make the sport gender equitable in especially in Olympic competitions. So what they did is they dropped C2 and added C1 women, which is really cool. I mean, it's not cool they dropped C2, but I love that they brought in C1 women. So that's my favorite thing to watch. That's what I want to go watch in 2024, honestly. But I think for just C2 specifically, without there being sort of a big goal. Now, there's definitely people out there that still paddle C2s, and I'm assuming you're talking about like deck C2s and maybe a little bit more specifically, maybe even slalom and stuff like that. But there's people out there that are still paddling C2s, but you don't see, tends to be more specialty paddlers that use them. C2s just aren't quite as versatile as, like a tandem open boat or something, but they're a lot of fun.
I should point out that in Wayne's bio, he explained that he focused on C2 paddling for a number of years and made is that the US team? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, I
I
never
have a
met-
question.
Go.
So
Go
this is
ahead.
Jan Dooley again. My son competed in C1 and made the junior national team, and he's now coaching. So I get to go to some of the junior national slalom competitions. Last year, there was exactly one male that tried out for the junior team and 3 females. We don't have any youth in canoe slalom anymore. They are talking about taking it out of the Olympics.
Ah.
Any comments on that?
They've been talking about taking it out since they had it in. It's a constant discussion.
I'm in Miami right now training a 13-year-old. He's going to go to Europe this summer. Hopefully he does. As long as he's not at the bottom of the pack, then I'll feel good.
There you go. Who is it?
His name's Cody Lindemann. But if we're tossing out names, I heard you talking about how great it is to watch women C1, and Evie Leafarth is amazing and really
Mhm.
incredibly fun to watch.
Yeah, Evie's medaled at World and World Cup and World Championship events in C1 and kayak.
We went last year to the, oh shoot, there's a race in Pennsylvania. It's a small spring. Anyway, there were, Alden Henry was putting on the race, I believe, but there was a group of young paddlers from the Potomac. We had Cody actually has a twin sister who also paddles sometimes. There were 3 or 4 different groups of youth. There were more kayaks than C1 by far, but I don't think it's dead. It's kind of like I've been hearing canoeing is dead for 40 years, and here we are still saying the same thing.
I wanted to just bring up a thought on possibly the safety of open canoeing versus kayaks. You don't have your legs out in front of you where you could get pinned, stuck in your kayak. I always thought open canoeing was a little safer actually, because you can get out quicker and you can't get, you're not apt to get stuck with your legs out in front of you and collapsed on you and some of that stuff. That was another thing I always thought was better about open canoeing. Just
I'll
want to
second that
hear what
motion.
thoughts are.
Now, that was always a big factor. I'm sorry, Eli.
No, you're good. Tell us.
Oh, that was always a big factor for me. And quite often getting to a drop, if you are getting into steep stuff, you can stand up, take a quick look and see a heck of a lot more from further back than the typical kayak method is to pull almost right up to the edge and then back paddle out. And although I was always jealous that they could back paddle back out of that, I never liked the idea of getting that close to it without taking a look. So
I think I've broken 2 C1s catastrophically in front of me over the years, where if I'd been in a kayak, my legs would have been really, really hurt. And I had one other opportunity where I was in an open canoe. I think it was a Viper 11, where I was creaking something steeper than I probably should have been creaking at the time. But I did get stuck in the boat when the boat folded in on my knee, and I had to yank pretty hard a few times to be able to get free. So it's not impossible to get stuck, but it is less common, I think. Have friends that can pull you out if you're going to do that stuff. That's really what it comes down to.
Very true.
good
There's a-
friends are always the best backup option.
True. There's one question in the chat that nobody's come close to yet, which is a discussion about the canoe building materials. Now that Royal X is gone, what's going to happen?
I guess since I'm a skiff guy, I should say that though Royal X is gone, T-Form X is virtually the same thing as Royal X from the last 20 years. It's not as good as the Royal X before Kyoto protocols banned some of the substances, but you're going to have a hard time telling the difference really between the two. When I think of other materials, Empty Canoes out of Montana, they're making some really nice glass boats, and the patterns that they're able to put on those boats are amazing that we're not seeing with the T-Form X or the What else is out there? The tough stuff, the tough weave. Rotomolded polyethylene with the small boats makes sense, but not a big boat because they just become too heavy when you want something more than about 10 feet long. I had high hopes for that Twin-Tex material. I don't really care for it on rocky rivers.
Why not?
It's fragile.
Okay,
And it's more difficult to, if I'm going to be in something that fragile, I'd rather use a composite glass boat that I can repair easily. It's not that I couldn't repair the Twin-Tex, but it was more time and effort than I cared to put in on a repair job, particularly when I was breaking boats a lot. What other materials can we think of? What else is out there? Triple dunk. Thinking of the big heavy Coleman's. Nobody wants that.
is anybody besides MT Canoes making nice composite canoes?
There are Andy Congree, I think was his name, Echo Canoes up in Canada.
Mhm.
Who else? Novacraft, I believe, makes pretty nice boats.
Ted Bell has something called an IXP that he's selling as being just as tough as Royal X, but it's a composite. He's pretty proud of it. There's some YouTubes out there where they were running the Rio Grande with it, and it took a lot of abuse. It held up pretty well and repairable.
Cool.
I guess it's funny because I go back and forth just like I do in what type of canoeing I'm doing. Throughout the years, I've gone back and forth with materials. And I remember swearing that I would never paddle a glass boat again because I was so tired of crawling into my sleeping bag and feeling that fiberglass itch when I would have that nylon touch my skin. But I was in a glass boat today, so shows what that has to say.
Which companies are using T-Formex for material? Jim Ledbetter asks, he says Esquif is using them, but aren't some other companies using it too?
I know Skiff is manufacturing it and they are selling it to others. I believe that Mad River was making a boat or two out of that.
Mhm.
I'm not positive who all is purchasing, whether there's Buffalo Canoes had gotten some material. Unfortunately, that's a better question for somebody in the factory than somebody playing in the boats.
Right? Yeah. Oh, and somebody mentioned Millbrook for composite boats.
Oh, John Cass, great, yeah.
Yeah.
Is Cass still making boats?
He is. He threatened to retire, then took a whole slew of orders, I think, so.
Good.
There's an old question in the chat about how do we encourage newcomers to canoeing, especially young people? How do you get people started?
Well, I guess I'm the youngest of the three of us and I'm not young anymore, but
Right?
I think summer camps was the first place I was exposed.
Mhm.
Still have some excellent summer camps in the Southeast. I'm thinking of Camp Mondamin and Camp Green Cove. Eagle's Nest is another. There are some.
Marywood,
Marywood, yeah.
there's a bunch of them. Falling Creek,
Mhm.
Rockmont.
I would also say the intercollegiate program is still active. They had to quit. They had to quit calling their big championship the Styrofoam Cup. Apparently, it insulted the maker of styrofoam. But there are some. There's a lot of people that are impressionable, 17 to 22, that can be exposed to recreational and slalom canoeing. Through the at least in the Southeast and up into Michigan. I don't know where all, but I know there are some bigger schools playing those games. Penn State used to be. I don't know if they still play.
I'd like to add to that question. I'm originally, it's so nice to hear the accents. I'm from the Southeast and my paddling has been way back, but I used to work on the Canoe. I had a Nolan boat. I was at the 96 Olympics. And I wanted to get my son, he followed me in guiding for NOC on the Pigeon. He's a large person. And I find it, canoeing would be eminently sensible for him for the capacity kind of, when he was trying to just paddle with a kayak, nobody ever had a boat big enough for him back east. And that was something that I wish, it's just been a passion for me, is to get people who do not fit the bell curve, because I know people with disabilities too, that how do you get them to that point of they love what they do and they understand it's some work. I used to teach kids at Rockbrook, which was another camp. It's funny to hear these names, but teaching canoeing. And I came from the Georgia Tech School of Miller Canoeing, Miller Templeton, old name there. But anyway, just how, I would really love, I'm in the Pacific Northwest, it's cold here. I don't know that I'll get back south. But if there were just some focuses too on getting people that are not in the bell curve interested, because canoeing is so beautiful and graceful. And I mean, why did I canoe instead of kayak? I mean, I did kayaking too, but it's really that grace and beauty of what a single stroke can do. It's a dance with the water. And, if there's something that ends up in the comments or in the recording, like where to get, like start even working on getting that bell curve kind of idea, getting people outside the norm interested. I know we're having trouble. I mean, not having trouble, but there's like getting people interested, period, but also adding it to people who are not within a norm, teaching to that population. So I don't know, that's kind of all over, but because I'm also recently retired and may have some time to volunteer and think about this kind of thing. So if there's that kind of information out there or schools of thought, I would appreciate it.
Bernadette, real quick, where in the Pacific Northwest are you?
I'm actually in Portland, and I know you're here. And I joined last year and then I retired. And so now I'm kind of like, okay, I'll join again. And I haven't accessed the resources. I was in an intensive job. So anyway, yeah, that's good. If there's teaching here, I'll investigate.
I'll drop a link in the chat. The club actually does have a beginning canoe club or beginning canoe class coming up, taught by one of our younger members. I think Elise is probably in her late 20s or early 30s. And, just as an add-on to the question for the panelists about how do you get people excited about canoeing, I would say, as an addendum to the question, what have you seen the best clubs do? What advice might you have for the club with regard to the role that we might play?
So probably one of the best events that I have seen clubs host is the Carolina Canoe Club is continuing to host this Week of Rivers. That's right around that week of the 4th of July. And literally people come from all over the country to do that. And they'll post up different rivers, what the river levels are, what they've got different classes going on at the same time. It's based out of a campground. And it truly is the best thing that I've seen. Now they not only are they, paddling and getting together and having fun. And it's just a great week of spending time together. It's a great time to explore new rivers because they'll have river leaders, and a river leader can just, if they've got good experience, they can say, hey, I'm willing to lead a trip over on the Tellico or the Ocoee or, whatever the familiar, unfamiliar river is. And then people can, if they've never been over there, they have somebody experienced to go with. And so, but then they also have just like technical day classes too, to learn skills and water reading and river running and all that. So, a big event like that is a great way to introduce new people to it, because there's always a plethora of boats there, and a lot of skills too to kind of share and bring new people in. So.
My experience with the Georgia Canoe Association was they had access to a pool in the wintertime, and sort of contrary to my comments earlier about being afraid people might get discouraged, it was quite the contrary. A lot of kids would show up at the pool, and there's, as Wayne said, there's plenty of different boats and plenty of different people that are there both practicing and teaching, and and that seemed to enchant an awful lot of young people to it. And I think sometimes they were just people who were wandering by and or coming to the pool for something else and got intrigued by it. So that is not something I would have assumed would work, but it sure seemed to work with those particular winners with Georgia Canoe Association.
I was thinking on that same page for new people, they may not be up for a full 8-hour day on the water. And so a small section of water that has a place where people can just congregate and tell stories and grill out, where they also have different boats available that they can try, would be better than putting somebody in a boat and being like, this is your boat and this is what you're going to paddle today, because they may not fit in that boat. When I think about bigger people, you know, I love canoeing, but that doesn't mean it's the best craft for everybody. A shredder is a perfectly good boat that lets you still use the canoe strokes. It's inflatable. There's inflatable. Grabner makes the inflatable canoes as well. I've been impressed with some whitewater that those have managed to do. So though I love canoeing, I know not everybody does. And having something, you know, the goal is that if you're on the water with somebody, everybody has a good time. Nobody has a good day if somebody's having a bad day.
And I'll second that motion, since my knees don't work well and getting low enough for a canoe, a shredder is perfect. And a shredder is a great opportunity to put somebody that may know very little about whitewater on the other side. If they will just follow instructions and not overpower you, then you can get on some really difficult stuff and have a great time. And people just kind of can't believe that they could make it down through there. It's just a great craft for that, teaching somebody new.
We have at least a handful of canoes in the Lower Columbia Canoe Club's quiver. Do we have a shredder, Will? Can you put me in a shredder?
The shredder is an inflatable. It's like a small raft.
Okay,
For two
Brian
people.
Stewart has one.
all right.
Yeah.
I think I want to try it. One kayaker convert from tonight.
All right.
I'm
That's
gonna
success.
dance on the water. Dance right now.
That's right. Yeah. Well, any more questions in the chat, Teresa?
Oh yeah, there's lots in here we could mine out. How about this one? Why don't I see more bent shafts in whitewater canoeing? From Noah Phillips. Well, bent shafts for whitewater, what do you say?
So I've raced with bent shafts. I've done downriver racing with slight bent shafts, like 13, 14 degrees, but not anything more than that. Actually, no, that's not true. All my downriver races were probably a 4-degree bent shaft, and probably 13 or 14 was more for sit down open boat and open boat racing, like triathlons and stuff like that. For whitewater, for me, just having the sometimes the bent shaft will it's harder to kind of transition and do compound moves with it. It's great for doing forward strokes, but it's not great for doing compound strokes. So you'll see a lot of open boaters here in the Southeast using curved blades, which sort of resemble kayak blades, or shaped a little bit differently, but it tends to get a stronger catch at the beginning, so it's a little bit more powerful stroke when you first put it in the water. It's a little different going in the water, so some people don't like that. It can be a little wonky on your feathering and other strokes like that, compound strokes, if you're not used to it. But once you get used to it, I don't ever notice it anymore. That's all I have. So
I guess my worry a little bit is the durability of the bent shafts that I've seen. I don't know this for sure because I haven't really pushed them, but I'd be a little bit concerned about going with the non-power face and the power face back and forth. But I'm sure a craftsman could solve that for me. I'm not opposed to different shapes. I'm very excited. I had Jimmy Snyder. He just made a paddle that he's shipping to me now that I'm changing the blade shape.
nice.
So I'm trying to use a little bit more of a little bit more paddle under my boat and a little less on the other side. So this will be my onside here. And then my offside, I'm thinking that I should be able to get a little bit of extra, almost like knuckle when I'm doing that cross bow pry, or what do we call it, Wayne, a sweep or something?
Yeah, probably a cross forward stroke maybe, because you're crossing and trying to turn it towards the
But as
your
opposed to,
onside.
but not a forward where I'm going forward, but actually turning the boat specifically.
Yeah, that'd be a cross, like a cross sweep. Not many people do those, but they're super effective when you can do them well.
Or they can be a mistake if you don't.
This is true, because you can totally trip over it.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
I would
couple
think-
more comments about bent shafts in the chat. One is that this fellow, Dan Valeski, uses a bent shaft for his spare paddle, and he'll pull it out for the flat water and then slip it back in the bilge and pull out the straight shaft for whitewater, it sounds like. And then,
There you go.
yeah, which sounds smart. And he
Yeah.
mentions that Winona and Buffalo are also using T4Max. And then just jumping subjects. And then another person, Paul Norman, says that with the bent shaft, a low brace is almost impossible.
Oh, that was Alex, I think.
Was that Alex?
Yep.
Do you guys concur?
Seems tricky. I hate to think anything's impossible, but it doesn't seem easy.
Yeah, it won't happen quite as quickly, although interestingly enough, you can have a pretty flat blade while you're kind of reaching out. If you think about it, would be bent like that.
Mhm.
And so you could have almost reach out a little bit more over the boat, get the blade in the water and have your paddle out over the side more. But I mean, I've never messed with that before, but theoretically I could see where maybe that would work, but still all the other things that are combined in there, just for the straight up low brace, I could see it, but all the things that follow and precede it might get a little more complicated.
I've made fun of the riding pry for years. I've seen it used effectively, but it's not for me. And I think no brace with a bent shaft is the same.
Yeah.
Tell us what a riding pry is.
So it's a matter of just jamming your paddle straight in at your hip and prying to, basically you're riding the boat with a pry, but in my mind, you should be reaching forward and grabbing water going the way you want to go.
Right. So basically you're falling away from your paddle and you're levering to try to not fall over.
You're flipping to your offside. Yeah.
Yeah. Oops. Okay.
So
Not
use a high brace.
I've seen people do it multiple times.
No, it's not a high brace.
Oh.
Literally you're jamming it, you're trying to cram it up underneath your boat and then you're doing a pry, but you're having to stick it in so much that you're almost sticking it up underneath your boat. So you're reaching out over top. So, and then when you lever it, like Eli's saying, then it pulls that gonal down into the water and levels the boat again.
Yeah, and it does essentially the same thing as a high brace would, away from the boat. That's what you were saying. Eli?
Yeah. So you do the high brace on your own side, the pry on your offside.
Oh, offside.
The high brace is kind of pulling yourself back in. The riding pry is forcing the boat back into a level position. Come to Tennessee again, we'll play.
All right, that seals it.
I got another question if you guys are ready for the next one. What changes help as knees are aging besides raising the seat?
Oh,
Old knees don't want to fold. Now what?
Don't use the water pump.
Yep.
Get out of the boat every
Get out of
chance
the
you
boat.
get.
Kneel more often.
That's right. Drink lots of water.
yeah.
Probably some turmeric and some anti-inflammatory. So you can probably speak to this better than me.
They're all on my list already. Yeah.
So cosamine chondroitin.
little extra foam.
I used to just play a lot, flip over and roll a lot. That helps the knees.
It does, yeah.
Well, are we winding down, Teresa, with the?
That seems to be all the questions, unless somebody wants
Mm-hmm.
to pipe in really soon.
The only thing I would add real quick is when we were talking about slalom is amazing and it definitely made me a better paddler. But something we haven't mentioned that also made me a really good paddler is attainments. And during COVID, I wasn't able to travel and do rivers a lot, but I had a small stretch of water that I learned how to go downstream a mile and come right back up. And it's nice not to have to drive around a lot, but it forces you to think about your paddle placement and your body position. And it's a lot of fun. You see, you get immediate feedback as to whether you're doing a good job or not.
And a great workout.
Great
Mhm.
workout.
And it's repetitive in the same place where you can test yourself and see if you're getting better.
Yeah, and you often have to use more subtle angle control too of your boat. You learn pretty quickly how much is too much and how much is not enough.
Great tip, Eli.
Love it.
Yeah.
We got a
Well-
new one here.
Oops, one more.
I'm old. My knees hurt, so I ripped out my saddles and hung seats in my boats. I also installed knee pads, but no straps, so I'm still a little loose. Any suggestions for tightening things up? So he's got seats and knee pads, but no straps.
Knee
This is Bill
blocks.
Brock.
So you could build little cups for your knees, and that would keep your knees from sliding around. I mean,
Yeah.
that's essentially what you do in a C1. And so you just build little cups to kind of stabilize them. You're not going to keep them from coming up off the floor, like if you lift a leg up for edging or tippiness or whatever, but it'll at least stabilize, allow you to kind of engage your knees and your hips a little better. And you can also put in hip blocks too on the seat to engage for turning the boat and getting more power out of your strokes and engaging your torso.
20 years ago, there were things called knee boots that were basically Velcro cups that went over your knee, and you could pull those off if you don't want them and then snap them back on if you do. Not sure where you would find those now. You might have to make them.
They might, you might could modify raft tow hooks where people can, kind of hook their front foot in, especially in the front little compartment. We used to do that on the Ocoee is in our rafts, is to put the little thing so the people up front, sometimes hard to jam a foot in under the tube up there. And so we put this little thing in the bottom. And so you could do that, because I've seen those things that are like what Eli's talking about. They look very similar. So you might be able to modify.
What are
them.
they called? Those foot cup things?
They were
I
called
don't know.
knee
It seems
boots,
like a
but
foot cup would be, but
Foot cup.
but they were made specifically for knees.
Rocky Garrett knee boots.
Oh, what is it again, Ed?
Rocky Garrett knee boots.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Rocky made them. He lives in Crossville.
Okay.
I actually have a couple at my shop in the Nantahala, along with every other possible outfitting, whatever that's hanging around that I didn't use.
I got some of them in a Phantom.
And they did work. They did work pretty well. I just always liked solid contact between my thigh and a foot brace. And that way the boat is not going to do anything that I don't transfer my energy to. And I think that's what most people didn't ever, seemingly, so many people didn't understand that was such a key to performing in an open boat, is how tightly can you lock yourself to that boat so you're not subconsciously limiting your strokes, because it makes you slide. And so your body tells you, well, don't do that. But if you're locked in there so tight that you can use every bit of your energy and your balance, then it's a whole different ball game. And I think that an awful lot of people don't understand that. You certainly couldn't achieve that with the outfitting system that he described, but you know, you got to do what you got to do when you got pain and older knees.
You just made me wonder if you other canoeists are the same. I have a student that loves to always count his pegs and put them exactly in the same spot on both sides. And I found that not only do I have one shoulder lower than the other nowadays, but I tend to have one toe peg in a different position than the other. And I tell people to just go with what's comfortable, which is why mine are that way. Am I the only one? What do you think?
No, same here. I agree, Eli.
Yep.
There's no reason in the world to think they have to be even.
Our bodies aren't made even. I mean, no kidding. I mean, I'm not even making that up. You do body measurements, and you're like, on me, it's really interesting that my leg length on my right and left are the same length, but my femurs are, at one point, they were like an inch difference. And so then, the tib fib kind of makes up the other. So and then that changes everything around, right? So
when you get your knees cut off, they can straighten that out for you.
Something to look forward to.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Well,
I have a comment.
oh, go ahead.
So it sounds like we have a variety of people from clubs here. And somebody mentioned earlier about the Carolina Club doing a week of rivers. I've always thought that would be a great idea. I lead a lot of trips, and it'd be really nice to go to somebody else's area and learn their rivers under their guidance. So I don't know if other clubs kind of have a week of rivers or something where people from outside could join in.
So the Houston Canoe Club used to have a big event, but I don't think they do it anymore. And I kind of remember it being in February. Golly, what was that called? But yeah, there's other ones out there.
TSRA, Tennessee Scenic Rivers Association, used to have an awful lot of events like that, and I'm sure you could just Google TSRA and find their calendar.
Tennessee Scenic Rivers Association.
Yes.
Paddle TSRA.org.
Okay.
Well, I have all of you. The Lower Columbia Canoe Club would gladly host you out here in the Pacific Northwest. We don't have a week of rivers. I'll put a link to our calendar in the chat, but we do have 2 annual events that we host every year. And they're both weekends. So we've got a weekend on the Umpqua, which is a lovely river in Southern Oregon, and a weekend on the Mackenzie, sort of middle of the state. And you would find other canoeists at those events. Will, in particular, is leading and organizing the Umpqua weekend. Yeah. Bernadette, we'll see you there.
I could just comment to that. 3 weeks ago, I visited my sisters out in Victoria. I'm from Ontario, and I just became a member of the South Island Whitewater Club. It was $30. I called up someone. I took my dry suit. That was it. They gave me a boat, a paddle, and a group of 8 canoeists to go down the Chemainus, I think. It was fantastic time just to canoe another part of North America. So it was $30. So so it was any canoe club, I'll pay the $40 membership fee and just show up and maybe make some acquaintances quickly. I think most of us are into that. And if anyone comes to Ontario, of course, they can paddle with our club too.
In the Southeast, this weekend coming up, there's about a 10-day, I hesitate to really call it, I don't know what to call it. It's a gathering of canoeists. It's called ALF, Ain't Louis Fest. But it started with Canadians fleeing the snow and coming down to play during spring break. And it's evolved into now easily a couple hundred paddlers gather. And so there's trips on class 1 water, there's trips on class 2, 3. There's different people going other directions every day. It's highly disorganized, but lots of people, it's more canoes than you'll see in one place at any other festival I can think of. Kayaks are also invited, or rafts or whatever, but that happens every year from, whenever the time changes. It seems like it's always part of the time change, which adds to the dysfunction of the event, or maybe to the allure of the event. I don't know how you-
I would also
Okay.
put a shout out for the Open Canoe National Slaloms. That's a fun event. And it's all canoes trying to do what we do better, and it's fun.
I agree with that. And although that's the slalom event, the paddlers often gather and paddle a nearby river after the event. So that's a fun time. Definitely more than $30, but Jim Coffey with a spree rafting does trips down to Costa Rica and Mexico. Has safety boaters along, and he has boats down there. They're a lot of fun. I haven't done it in 10 years now, but it was great when I did.
Thanks for all those suggestions. They sound, it helps to get people together throughout the year. Well, it's been a little more than an hour, and if there aren't any, compelling questions left,
There's one.
Oh, there's one.
Oh,
Okay.
there's always one more. This is someone who still wants to talk about how to learn how to roll.
All right.
Do you want to do it, or do you want to move on?
Well, it's up to our speakers, really. Stay a little longer.
The way I was teaching rolling when I was doing it pretty regularly, first you've got to get somebody oriented to be upside down, because it, as simple as that sounds, it's very disorienting.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times putting a mask on so that they're not getting water rushing up their nose and all the distraction and discomfort of that can be very helpful. And it also allows you to look around and see what you're doing, see where your paddle position should be. You want it to be as close to the surface as you can. And for me, it's reaching a little bit further back, because in combination to going side to side, it always worked better if you're going from a little bit further back to a front lean. And then that adds the ability to bring your nose right across the gunnel, down across the belly of the boat, and up the opposite side. That would be a thumbnail version of what I used to teach, and seemed to be an effective way.
I would say the 3 points that I hit the hardest are to make sure that your body is floating all the way on the surface. I like to get my hands, at least the shaft hand, I'd like to be in the air when I start. And then before I do anything with the paddle, I want to do my hip snap. I don't know if I should call it a hip snap. I'm pushing with one knee, lifting with the other, but my pelvis actually shifts position. And to finish, I agree 100% with Nolan taking your nose across, but I like to bring my T-grip all the way across the opposite gunnel. And I find that slows things down and helps people. A lot of times you see people when they roll up, but their weight's still over here. And so by bringing the T-grip over, it allows things to equalize. Those are my 3 big tips, probably.
It just moves the weight to the other side of the boat and finishes the roll up.
Those are all really
I've had that
excellent
happen before, where people were not rolling, and I say, just like what Eli was saying, just pull your hand all across the boat, and then all of a sudden they're rolling.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think you hit the high points, certainly of rolling, all of you. So I think we'll call it quits after that one. Really, a shout out to the 3 of you, Eli, Wayne, and Nolan, for making this possible, donating your time. And it's been really quite informational for me, enlightening, inspiring even. So I hope the rest of you found it the same way. Thanks so much for being a part of this. Long live canoeing.
Thanks for the
holler
invite.
when you come to the Southeast.
Sure will. Yeah, I'd love to
Good
meet
to
you.
see. real good to see all you guys.
Thank you so much to our panelists.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
All right, good night.
Thank you. Yep, cheers.
Is
Thanks,
everybody's-
Teresa. That was so helpful.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad. I didn't know if I was going too aggressively or not. But I didn't tell everybody.